Hi, good evening. So tonight we're going to discuss about the rule of law and the controversial separate but equal law in the United States of America. Our first case for tonight is about Plessy versus Ferguson. Plessy is actually a 1/8 African American who bought a first class ticket to the East Louisiana Railway. Unfortunately, he was arrested because he sat on an all white seat or area. In Louisiana, they are adopting the law, which is separate but equal rule, which means that there is an area or a separate area allocated or designated for the colored, specifically the African Americans, and the white or the Caucasians. Since Plessy sat on the all white seat or area and he refused to leave, then he was arrested for violating the rule or the law on separate but equal. Well, Plessy was found guilty, but he claimed and fought that this Louisiana law was actually violating the 13th Amendment right against slavery, and it is also violating the 14th Amendment right on equal protection. However, the court ruled in favor of Louisiana. The court did not find that there was any violation of the 13th Amendment, and they said that it defined the 13th Amendment, asserting that it did not accept the argument that Louisiana law limited Plessy and others' freedom to so great an extent that their freedom is of very little value. The court held that Louisiana's law merely distinguished between the races. That's why they made them separate. But it did not create legal inequality between the races. It contended that the law permitted them to remain equal. The court analyzed that the law was merely consistent with the established usages, customs, and traditions of its citizens, and it was focused on the promotion of the comfort of its citizens, and that it was oriented towards the preservation of the public peace and good order. The court held that the Louisiana law and any law which authorizes or even requires the separation of the two races in public conveyance are reasonable. That was the ruling under the Plessy versus Ferguson case. Now let us proceed and compare it with the Brown versus Board of Education. In the case of Brown versus Board of Education, the plaintiffs, who are African American parents who tried to enroll their children in an all-white school because it is the closest school just a few blocks away from their homes compared to the designated school for the Black Americans, which is hours away from their homes. Unfortunately, the school did not permit these students to be enrolled in their all-white school, assailing that there is a different school for them. It's because of their race. The schools assailed that they were just acting in accordance with the Kansas law, which is separate but equal rule. Aside from the distance, the African American parents also assailed that there is inequality in terms of quality of education and facilities between the all-white schools and the African American schools, which actually deprive their children of the Equal Protection Clause. Hence, they filed a case in court. Of course, the trial court denied and dismissed their case until it reached the Supreme Court. Fortunately, the Supreme Court were in favor of these African American parents. The outcome of the case was a ruling in favor of the plaintiffs and a determination that the equal protection in the form of equal education opportunities was not provided to white students and to African American students through the Kansas law, and that the separate but equal principle upheld in the Supreme Court case Plessy versus Ferguson did not apply to public education. It also found that the Equal Protection Clause was in violation of the Due Process Clause. In their analysis, The court focused on the fact that when federal and state governments administer educational programs, they are charged with especially important duty to ensure that all recipients are benefited equally. This is because the court reasoned the benefits associated with an education are fundamental to a child's social development and their future and continued success in life. The effect of race based separation in education, as enforced by school segregation laws, is to indelibly impart to certain groups of students a sense of inferiority. Hence, the court decided that the mere presence of race based segregation in a school system deprived the African American students of the benefits of education that are required for a social development and success. For that reason, it held that such separate educational facilities are inherently unequal and deprive the African American students of equal protection under the law. Clearly, in the Plessy versus Ferguson case, the rule on equal but separate principle was strictly enforced. But in the case of Brown versus Board of Education, the court invalidated the concept of equal but separate principle in terms of equal basic education or in terms of education rights for the African Americans. The separate conflicting ruling actually show us that our law can be very rigid, but it can also be flexible based on reason and based on time. This very pronouncement actually led to the increase of gradual sensitivity towards human rights and equality. In relation to this, Paul Freund quoted that the court should never be influenced by the weather of day, but inevitably they will be influenced by the climate of the era. Freund actually referred to the climate of the era as the increasing sensitivity toward human rights and the large conception of equality under the law. This means that the law should not restrict its decision based on what was of the past, but it should also embrace the what is of today and, of course, consider the what if of tomorrow. In conclusion, I believe that our rule of law should evolve with the times because our needs and our circumstances also changes over time. This is pivotal in protecting the interest of our people and of course the welfare of the future generations. Thank you and good night.